So let me share my content and we'll get moving. Make sure that that pops up here. And I think we're good to go. So again, my name is Nate Arnold. I'm the CIO for our operations and our software engineering team in the GE Gas Power division. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been with GE for about 18 years and served in multiple roles in IT throughout that time. I'm a product of our early career leadership development program. So that program is called our Digital Technology Leadership Program. Although it was admittedly, it was a different acronym at the time that I took it, which just means that I'm old and I can speak uniquely to this divide topic. I've served in a number of different capacities related to that program in different business units, including leading the program for several years for our former GE Transportation division. When I originally put this content together, it was focused on the generational divide, and it was a pretty easy ad to focus on the geographical divide, which is really driven by our kind of immediate and widespread remote work as a circumstance of the global pandemic. So I think what you'll find is a lot of the recommendations, observations, if you will, from our perspective on the generation side to the remote experience as well. But as a company that has nearly 200,000 employees operating in over 180 countries, where 40% of our external recruiting is early career, you can imagine that this is a topic that we feel a tremendous responsibility to get right. And of course, you guys, I'm sure, can find a lot of available data comparing values, behaviors, working style preferences on this topic. My goal today really is just to give you an example of how our company has considered using this data from our employees. So we've got voice of the customer directly from our teams, and to offer some discrete suggestions on how you might implement some strategies to find success in this space. So hey, self-awareness in this game is for me as a late spectrum Gen Xer. I came into the workplace wanting good salary, stable benefits, and dare I say, a pension. And I like meeting people in person, right? I like to get to the office early. I stay late. That's part of how I think about hard work, and I'm loyal almost to a fault. When I think about recruiting people 2 generations removed, I assumed a lot of things, right? I assumed that they needed more remote options. They did not want a set schedule at all, wanted to be completely flexible in terms of hours. We needed to have video games and beanbag chairs and free food and free coffee in the morning, maybe free beer even in the afternoon, right? So when it feels like this compare and contrast game, it's easy to get completely overwhelmed, the transformation that's needed to be successful. If you think that you have to implement all those things, then that becomes a pretty daunting task. And for an old school guy like me, I think, wow, this could cost a lot of money and dollars to attract talent that's only going to stay with us for maybe 1 to 3 years. So like a good Six Sigma company, we pursue data to help us kind of address this problem and solve it. So our voice of the customer, we span over 1,700 responses, all disciplines, really: engineering, finance, IT, operations, HR. These are all domains where we have these leadership programs today. It was concentrated on our current program members. So this is the group of kind of immediate new hires and recent hires into those programs. About 60% of them were recent hires. We spanned recent graduates as well. So that's about the 3 to 5 year mark after graduating the leadership program. We had a balanced gender view, and about 50% of the group had interned or co-opted previously with GE. And here's what they said that they value most. First, constructive feedback and coaching. Second was matching work content to their desired areas of development. And the third was leadership that championed their career growth. Somewhat surprisingly, the ones that were kind of least of their concern were rewards and recognition and work-life flexibility. And of course, there's still more you need to dig into to understand all the data. For instance, this represents VOC from a majority of our engineering, financial, and IT population, that might not be the profile exactly for you and your companies, but it is, pretty common for us in those disciplines. And the takeaway really here for us was the divide certainly exists when you look at the input that was given and the expectations that we had a leadership team soliciting the input. First of our good partners at Universum, they provided this content and also helped us with our interrogation, really, of our teams to understand what was going on. It isn't a bad assumption that there are differences among the generations, and there are a couple here that maybe we didn't focus on even from the analysis of our feedback from our teams. One of these in particular is mentoring, right? I think that is one thing that we've had to address as we've thought about changes to our performance management systems. And GE actually overhauled our process of performance management in large part because of this expectation that we needed to provide more constant feedback. So moved away from a annual performance process to a more consistent, continuous performance process that was facilitated by mobile applications and the new performance management system. Additionally is retention, right? Retention may seem a bit more straightforward in some of the legacy generations. Salary, job security, retirement. Really, there's a much different focus that we see with our early career population in really focusing on personal development, right? And the ability for them to have an opportunity to pivot their expectations and their interests and be supported in that change and be provided opportunities to grow, differently as they expand their opportunities there and expand their experiences in the company. So again, what we really did in this process of collecting information from our teams is solidify the expectation of the divide, right? Because when we say the divide, it really is that this difference between the boomers and the Gen Xers that I'm most familiar with as a leader and what we expect and see from those that we're hiring new. So, how do you attack this landscape? Well, really, enter the frontline manager. The focus comes to their first experience managing teams and how we prepare those individuals for this experience. And an interesting data point that we took away from this analysis was that up to about 3 years ago, about 15% of our people leaders were millennials. And even though that stat has doubled since then, still over half of our people leaders today are 2 or more generations removed from the entry level individuals. So the takeaway for us was clear. We needed to focus our attention and refresh our training specifically to managers. Right? So that was a big takeaway for me is if I look at what my position in the organization, thinking specifically just about those first-time entry employees, individuals into the teams, it wasn't that population that we had to focus on as much as initially we had to focus on who their managers were and how their managers' expectations were clear. So the 7 to 5 PMers like me really had to understand how to flex our leadership styles to support that. There's a great analysis that we lean into from our partners at Gartner that was into new manager mandate, build connector managers. It's about a 200-page analysis, so contact your local analyst for all the details there for your leadership teams. But here's really what we took from it. Number one, most people feel like they want an always-on manager, someone that's on demand, fully present leadership. What most people have is a cheerleader, hands-off, learn by experience type manager. In my opinion, sometimes this is the easy way out for a manager who is maybe not as comfortable kind of flexing their style for different types of employees, or maybe doesn't have as broad a managerial toolkit. They kind of fall into this bucket of cheerleading. The teacher is probably the comfort zone for a baby boomer or a Gen Xer like me. Let me show you how it's done. I've been there. It should look like this. Here's my experience. It doesn't work well when you get into situations where you're managing teams and managing to expectations and roles for things that you maybe haven't done before. And I've experienced this directly in my responsibility with our software engineering teams, where I've in 18 years experienced a lot of different roles in GE, coming through in areas of responsibility, but I haven't played a role in QA, in Scrum mastering, in architecture, and some of the roles and teams that I'm leading today. I can't fall back on that experience that I've had to directly try to become a teacher manager, right? So all of the research, but that experience personally for me and all the research suggests that the connector manager really is the best in terms of development ultimately. And that's what we started to focus on as we changed our recruiting capabilities and our training capabilities. So you want to establish personal connection with these team members. There's specific needs and interests. You need to understand that allows us to target developmental plans and also to consider different retention strategies and growth strategies, right? There's a broader spectrum of personal connection that is expected by these teams that you need to spend time getting to know. Spend time building team connections as well. Be transparent about the team development goals and encourage peer development, right? So a lot of times they will respond better to development and collaboration with a peer on a team versus looking to you as a leader to provide that feedback directly. And then you need to drive connections within the organization. So I think personally, gone are the days of very siloed recruiting and the approach where you always try to hold on to your best talent and raise your best talent just within your part of the organization. These individuals are really looking for folks that have their best interests in mind to grow across the organization, including moving to different areas of the organization. And you have to be an active partner in helping them build those, establish those connections and build those relationships so that they can pursue that personal development. So a quick note here on the word cloud in the bottom. I think as a Gen Xer, I have to admit that I interpret the word lazy, right? So when we pull this information from our teams, we interpret the word lazy as, hey, I'm sleeping in, I'm checking Facebook all the time, I'm not really present in the moment. In reality, what it means to this generation is they don't want to waste time. They want to waste time in 6 minutes of traffic to and from an office where there's a bunch of inefficient processes and tools. They would rather blaze their own path, create their own opportunities. They want to pursue optimization and eliminate inefficient processes and work and waste as fast as possible. So for me, that's the interpretation here is the word lazy just means that we haven't challenged the bureaucracy enough to improve and break down barriers. And this is a population that we can really lean into to be able to drive that more aggressively. So good people management is incredibly dependent on the discretionary effort around the experiences of your goals and objectives in your direct work. It's especially challenging during difficult times when people are even more guarded about their career status and the development and opportunities. So again, if we transition into current events, you see that manifesting itself in spades, where individuals are going to feel very concerned about their status in the organization, the status of their work, the status of their teams. You need to make it as easy as possible for the leaders of these people to plug into the individual personal development strategies. Show them good examples of connector leadership, reinforce the importance of personal, team, and organizational connection, Loneliness and fear of failure grip these individuals when joining a new workforce, right? So although that they are flexible to move back and forth, they very much want to be part of a team and feel the impact and the importance of their role in that team very quickly as they join an organization. Especially coming directly out of college, they're exiting 4 years of a tight knit community. They need that when they join your organization, right? And we focus a lot on that plan of community and that experience as we build out our leadership program curriculum to enable that and foster that for them across all of the different business units and of their personal experience. They've rarely failed growing up. Think maybe, for some of us, the participation trophy perspective, right? They're going to fail here sometimes in the workplace. And we're gonna have to focus heavily on helping them understand that failure and understand how they grow from that failure. What does that experience mean for them, and how does that help make them ultimately someone that can execute and deliver better in the end? What we do matters, and we have to have businesses that really drive that approach for these individuals, so they understand that their impact, their individual and their effort in a small scale and work contributes to the larger and greater good. So when we talk at GE about our mission and purpose, that brand matters to them, and we start initially in the leadership programs to make them understand that that's their expectation as they join us, is that they help drive that vision forward. This is a 2018 data that I'm sharing here, but again, we are focused on the profile of individual that we need, which is really engineering and IT, right? This is what GE is all about, innovating and building new solutions in our spaces. And I think it's an important takeaway for the folks here joining this session is you really have to be plugged into your brand, plugged into the type of work that you're doing and the type of employee that you're looking for when you're recruiting, and being committed to that vision and purpose and mission, and using that as part of your development programs, your early training for managers and leaders and individuals is going to help you to drive as effective a workforce as you can within this group. So we have that kind of base of work, and then there's the curveball of working remote and the widespread and immediate effect of working remote. And what I would suggest is that if you recall when we were talking about the word cloud earlier and interpretation of the word lazy, one of the examples I presented was around the 60-minute commute, right? And how that is perceived as wasted time. So what I would argue is that working remotely was really more of an enterprise challenge than it was an individual challenge initially. So this is an example of the campaign that we pushed aggressively across GE for our newly growing remote workforce, right? So of course we have a lot of the advantage in the scale of our companies. We have a lot of tools that already enable remote working. So that can't be said for all enterprises. In fact, the big push was just the capability to do that. But our concern was more directly security, right? So if you think of your own individual passwords, Wi-Fi passwords at home, your management of your security at home, how you think about documents and how you separate that personal and work experience when you're at home, it's hard to differentiate that, much harder than it is when you're sitting in an office. And it's much harder for us as IT professionals to drive that secure separation of access to data and the expectations of how you handle your work content, your work delivery versus your personal interaction. So we've spent a lot of time as an enterprise not just ensuring performance of our remote systems and availability, but really trying to drive the focus on security. And when you can't control the utilization of personal tools for data as easily when you're in a corporate network environment, that presents a big challenge for data. And that's been a big part of our push here for working remotely. But if you step back and say, okay, now we have a environment where we've transitioned a lot of people to remote work that maybe weren't initially planning for it or prepared for it. What are some of the things that we see and drive for them to be effective as employees? I think it comes back to some of the observations that we saw from the generational component as well. When you think of just the flexibility and the work-life flexibility as being its own motivator, what is drawn out here even more specifically with this remote work and the seamless nature, honestly, between day to day, hour to hour, of whether you're working or whether you're not working or someone else in the world is working, having clear expectations, regular working times, really point 3 and 4 in the middle there have been really, really critical for us, because it is, while initially nice to see the increase in productivity because you do have the elimination of those commute times, we quickly saw that wearing on individuals who felt like they always had to be on, right? If you just leave your laptop on in the corner of your room in your office, you can walk by it and hear a notification at any time of the day or night and feel responsible, accountable to respond, and especially with a global workforce. So we've had to double down our communications on regular office hour expectations, and our flexibility of our expectations on whether you should go into an office if that's available for you, depending on your personal health situation and your personal interest and comfort level, or not. And I think, again, that the structure for us has really emerged, that the communication consistency, the expectation consistency are the types of things that are really going to drive clarity within the organization and allow team members who are looking for that self-actualization, they're looking for that personal development, they're looking to see their fit into the larger scheme of delivery for your organization. And they really need that. And I think it comes again back to the effectiveness of their direct managers and how much intentionality they bring to personal connection with their teams and the expectation setting for their role in the organization and their development. So that's the edit. If for the content here, as Jason mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we're providing time for Q&A. So I'm gonna click up to the Q&A here, and Jason, I don't know how you want to facilitate that. If you want me just to go into the queue.
I will ask them to you, Nate. Yeah, so thank you very much for that. And thank you to those who have been able to supply some questions here. So first question came in the chat box from Morten Sorensen. Hi there, Morten. Glad you were able to join us today. Any challenges with getting leaders and managers to participate 100% in the continuous feedback process?
Yes, absolutely. Because, and I think what was interesting is that we found the documentation portion of it that was really the challenge. And it wasn't that they, all it did for us was prove what we knew, is there were good managers and there were not as good managers. And the good managers already had this rapport with their teams. And even if informal, they had a regular setup of one-on-ones. They were providing regular feedback. The trying to then drive that, suggesting that, hey, maybe the mobile phone, app was going to be something that was going to unlock and unleash that power for managers to be more effective, was really not true. You really had to be a focus more on the skills required to be a manager and less about the tool enabling continuous feedback. So I found it to be, very similar to the type of training and reinforcement that I had as I became a manager, that was more important than the tool itself.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, the questions are coming in from Praveen Nidamolu, who's also going to be leading a session. If everyone's on 5G, that'll be coming on one of the other days. Praveen asked, do you cover general recommendations to retain highly ambitious millennial talent past the first 3 years?
Yeah, 3 to 5 is the big target for us when we look at, we have program members on a 2-year program, right? So it generally for them, it's the 3 to 5 year total time and job. That's the target area for us. We have an established mentoring program with our alums of our leadership program. So again, I'm an alum, and we have a mentoring program that is broadly based across GE. So it's not just within our business or individuals that may have been on my team or maybe in my region. It's global, and it's across the businesses. So again, we're trying to drive that connection to the purpose of GE, and expose that opportunity for them beyond their current business unit or assignment, so that they understand that we can make those connections and they can have those challenges and opportunities. But it definitely is a very proactive strategy to keep them connected with senior level managers and mentors.
Fantastic, thank you. Question from Tanwir. First and foremost, comment, rise of the manager, great stats, the way we are promoting millennials. Question is, are you looking at other ways as well to break down the generational walls in your workplace culture?
Other than the manager focus, yeah, I mean, I think the really connection and source of community, sense of community, is one that we were really aggressively pursuing towards the end of last year. We're trying to drive activities that were informal social activities that we had probably gotten away from doing as aggressively or as consistently. Connecting them globally. So if we had an event in Atlanta, Georgia, we would connect that with Bangalore, India, and whether it was a cornhole tournament in a U.S. location, and a cricket tournament in an Asia location, we would compare and communicate those events heavily. So that sense of community and those activities. I also we are focusing heavily on our diversity and affinity group. So obviously current events has driven us to be much more aggressive in revising that. We've always had that present in my career in GE, but again, it's chief diversity officers being identified in each of our businesses and at our corporate level, and then really communicating that the availability of those individuals and the diverse affinity leadership groups, and what types of activities they can help drive into communities where we had maybe not done as many in recent years. I think those types of activities are really, we find that really binding the communities together in our different locations. So I think those are probably outside of the manager space. Definitely those kind of community activities and diversity activities are really a big focus.
Excellent, thank you very much. A few questions here related to obviously the pandemic that I'm going to kind of combine into one. We've got some comments here from Ken Visiana. First and foremost, great perspectives, great content, so thank you. So Ken asks, what challenges has COVID presented to your organization? And Stu asks, when COVID is over, what is your work from home plans?
So two things. I mean, we have in terms of affecting the business, two major ways. I mean, GE benefits a lot from commercial air travel, so you can imagine that has been a huge impact for us globally. In our business, gas power, we have the challenge of distributing unique expertise field engineers across the globe to perform service on our gas turbines. So that, again, the travel restrictions have really been difficult for us to work through. A lot of reschedule, so the work exists and people are using power, so that the need for service doesn't leave. But we just have had to be more creative with remote tools and trying to maximize the availability of critical resources. That's a couple ways that it's really affected GE. In terms of COVID and working from home, we've tried to be as definitive as we can be in acknowledging that we don't know the extent of this and the timing of it really, but you can't just drag it out. So we've actually permanently closed a lot of locations that had 50 or fewer individuals globally, and just committed them to work remotely. And then some of our larger locations, Atlanta is one of them, we are committing to a year of significantly reduced occupancy. So we're not closing buildings fully, but we're turning off floors, right? So we're consolidating onto floors, turning spaces into kind of hotel spaces, allowing people to come in, those folks that need to come in for any of the office features themselves. But we are committing to reducing that occupancy percentage, which helps us save obviously on the utilities of the facilities and the cleaning, because with the enhanced cleaning, that's always a big spend. But trying to be at least definitive enough to say, hey, for at least a year, we're going to see this kind of occupancy. So let's commit to the working condition and what we want to do there in terms of cost and footprint.
Thank you very much. Shane Spingler has a couple of questions here, one a little bit related to COVID, but I'm actually going to focus on the second question here, Shane. Shane mentions, while routine and clear expectations are important, especially around regular office hours, I have found that my IT team has to allow for some flexibility and check for emergencies to respond to. Since with remote working, it has allowed for flexibility for our business partners. We have to expect them to be online looking for support outside of the normal business hours. So how do you handle encouraging routine hours while still meeting the expectation for support of the other areas?
Yeah, I'm kind of smiling because I'm living through this right now, where we've had to troubleshoot something, and we've had an around the sun type of approach between our teams in India and Turkey and the US. And I think part of it is acknowledging that extra time and that extra work. So it's harder in an exempt workforce, maybe necessarily, to acknowledge the off-hour times, but we are keeping track of that time. We are, and we're committed to providing them, compensation for that time. Maybe not in rate compensation, but to say, hey, we're going to take some, some excused, unplanned downtime or vacation time to allow them to compensate for the time that they've spent in an extra. And I think, it doesn't necessarily have to be one for one and an hour by hour or a minute by minute, but I think just the fact that we're acknowledging that and accounting for that in some way helps the teams, I think, recognize that their efforts are recognized. We see what they're doing, we value what they're doing, and we're going to allow them to balance with some extra time off because of what they're doing. I think that's an important strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Tim Warren asked, did you have employees being overworked, or did you have employees that because being overworked because they were remote, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, a couple of ways. One of the ways, we actually highlighted some of our some remote team members, some remote workers that had some experience doing this, and invited them to staff meetings and all hands meetings to share just some of their lessons learned and best practices. So there's some credibility in that. It wasn't necessarily a leadership or a corporate talking point. It was just, again, goes back to that kind of manager lessons learned, right? The peer-to-peer feedback is perhaps more effective than just leadership flow down. So we did that. And then I think it's just been a consistency of acknowledging that on the leadership side and supporting flexibility. So when we were dealing with remote learning circumstances, which I know that many still are in many locations, but here in Georgia, we had a large county near our office where there were a lot of kids were doing remote work. We encouraged working families to put out of office during the times of starting school and switching over to the middle school times, and we tried to be faithful to not scheduling during those times, scheduling meetings during those times. So when people were out of office while they were helping their children, we supported that, and we made sure we talked about it, right? So supporting it implicitly is one thing, but being explicit about, yes, absolutely, please put in your out of office, please put a hold on these times, make sure you're doing what you need to do for your family to feel successful is huge, because I did it myself. I have 5 young kids, and I had to spend a lot of time troubleshooting technology and helping work through some assignments. And there were times of great chaos here, which you would have heard, I'm sure, on this Zoom meeting. But it's important that all the employees felt supported in those responsibilities.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Michael Onumero, this will be the last question, so thank you very much. But Michael Onumero asks, what does career development look like for a millennial at GE, knowing that, perceived notion is they like to be promoted quickly within 1.5, 2 years, and if not, they move on quickly. So how are you guys tackling that?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's and we've been our own worst enemy in that we've prided ourselves in that rapid development, rapid promotion, right? So we have bands, leadership band to senior professional band in GE, and there was a very accelerated expectation of the leadership program members to achieve those goals. So we've focused a lot on career path definition, job descriptions, try to keep that as contemporary as possible. Baseline the software industry at large for me in the software engineering space, making sure that we're being very clear in how we differentiate between a staff architect and a senior staff architect, and what that means specifically and what those expectations are. So we have the sub levels within band, which are promotions, but aren't always a compensated promotion or a band promotion. It's just a different job title. And I think, in different job title with those responsibilities, right? So clarity of the expanded scope, clarity of the necessary training to be able to execute those roles successfully. So we've had to spend a lot of time on that career path management so that we can articulate those opportunities and show them that there's a growth path that isn't just a lettered band or a salary raise necessarily. There's training and visibility that comes with those responsibilities as well.
Fantastic. Well, that's unfortunately all we have time for. So if everyone can first and foremost join me in giving a virtual round of applause to Nate. Thank you very much for taking your time, Nate. Some really fantastic insights and really cutting to the core to a lot of the challenges people are experiencing.